Mrs. Ferrara had worked in the Cavallo house for 22 years and understood its silences the way a sailor understands weather. There was the silence of the long tiled corridor at 6 in the morning, which was ordinary. There was the silence of the courtyard when Dante Cavallo crossed it, which was something else. The kind of quiet that spread ahead of a man the way a shadow spreads ahead of a lamp. Staff members found reasons to face the wall. Deliverymen signed their papers without looking up. Even the estate's old stone seemed to hold its breath. She had worked for powerful men before. None had carried themselves like him, still, contained, with a patience that felt more dangerous than fury. His empire ran quietly. His people were loyal without being told twice, and the world adjusted itself to his presence, rather than the other way around. He was not unkind. He was simply a man whose gravity bent the room. But it was not Dante Cavallo that Mrs. Ferrara watched most closely in those weeks. It was his son. Kirk was 8 years old and had not spoken a full sentence in 11 months. Not since his mother. The estate's physician had offered a diagnosis with a long name. The tutors had offered structured routine. 2 separate therapists had offered exercises in a language the boys seemed not to hear. What Nico offered in return was a closed door and, in the courtyard below, the occasional pale shape of his face at the window, watching, saying nothing. The folded cranes began in the 3rd week of April. Rosaria had come in as laundress at the start of the month. She was 24, slight, dark hair pinned back, and a way of moving through a room that took up almost no space. She arrived early, worked without complaint, pressed the household linens with the kind of attention that told Mrs. Ferrara this was a woman who found her dignity in her work, rather than in being seen. The senior staff barely noted her name. Mrs. Ferrara noted it. She could not have said, later exactly when she first saw the crane. It was a Tuesday, she thought. She had been carrying fresh towels up the east corridor and had nearly stepped on it. A small square of linen, and folded into the precise shape of a bird, left on the stone floor outside Nico's door. She picked it up, turned it over, set it back. The next morning there was another. She said nothing to anyone. She did not know what she was watching yet. Whether it was presumption, foolishness, or something she had no ready word for. She watched the laundry room instead. Rosaria rose before the house woke, the day's linens in the long gray quiet, and at some point, Mrs. Ferrara never managed to catch the exact moment. Slipped away to the corridor with one small folded shape, and left it and returned and said nothing. Anyone at all. There was no instruction behind it. No one had asked her to do this. It was not in her duties. She received no thanks, no acknowledgement, no sign from behind the closed door that the cranes were noticed. She left them anyway. 1 per morning, each folded from a clean square of pressed linen. Each left and walked away from without a backward glance. By the 2nd week, there were 11 cranes on Nico's windowsill. Mrs. Ferrara had seen them from the courtyard. She had said that to Mr. Cavallo because she was not certain what she would say, and partly because she was not sure the boy would want it said. But she had begun to feel, in the particular way long experience gives a person, that something was shifting in the house, something small and patient and real. It was Dante who noticed at the windowsill first. She saw him stop in the courtyard on a Wednesday morning, briefcase in hand, prepared for wherever the day was taking him. He looked up at the east window as he always did. A habit she had long understood, not a gesture. The look of a man checking on something he could not fix. And then he went still in a way that was different from his usual stillness. Not the stillness of a man composing himself before the world. The stillness of a man who has seen something he was not prepared for. He stood for a long moment, then he went. He said nothing to her that day, or the next, but Mrs. Ferrara noticed that he no longer left through the east gate in the mornings. He crossed the courtyard slowly. He looked up. On the 19th morning he was standing in the shadow of the far archway when Rosaria came up the east corridor. She did not know he was there. Mrs. Ferrara, returning from the linen closet, stopped at the corridor's turn and did not move. Rosaria carried the day's crane, a small, careful thing folded from a square of white linen, and set it outside Nico's door. She straightened. She was turning to go when the door opened. Nico stood in the doorway, in his socks. He looked at Rosaria for a long moment in the way children look when they are deciding something important. Then he held out his hand. In his palm was a crane he had folded himself. The paper was slightly crooked, one wing uneven, made from a page torn from the corner of a drawing book. It was unmistakably a crane. Rosaria looked at it. She took it from him carefully, both hands, the way you accept something that matters. Nico said in a voice that came out rough from disuse, "I made it for you." 4 words. 11 months of silence, and 4 words. Mrs. Ferrara did not look at Dante Cavallo in that moment. She looked at Rosaria, who held the small, uneven crane and nodded once with great seriousness, as though a solemn agreement had been reached between 2 people of equal standing. She did not weep. She did not make it large. She simply said, "It's very good," and meant it, and the boy's face did something it had not done in a long time. Then she said, "Same time tomorrow?" And Nico said, "Yes," and went back inside. She walked back down the corridor, past Mrs. Ferrara, with the crooked crane held in 2 hands. She did not look triumphant. She looked the way she always looked, quiet, contained, going about her work. Mrs. Ferrara turned. Dante Cavallo stood in the archway. He had not moved. His briefcase was at his side. He was not looking at the closed door, or at the windowsill, or at anything in particular. He was looking at the far wall, and the line of his jaw was tight, and Mrs. Ferrara understood, with the clarity that comes from 22 years of watching a man, that he was not composed. He was working to be composed. There was a difference. He stood there a moment longer. Then he set his briefcase down against the courtyard wall and walked. Not to his car, not to his office, down the east corridor. She found out later, from the cook, that he had knocked at the laundry room door, that Rosaria had looked up from the press, surprised, and said nothing, waiting, that Dante Cavallo, who issued no explanations to anyone, who had never been known to account for himself to a member of his household's staff, had stood in the doorway of the laundry room and said, "He's been quiet for 11 months. You gave him back his voice in 19 days. I would like to know how you did it." And that Rosaria, after a moment, had said, "I didn't do anything, I just didn't leave." Mrs. Ferrara was not there for what came after, but she stood a long time in the quiet courtyard, looking up at the east window where 19 linen cranes stood in a row on the sill, and she thought about what it cost a powerful man to be undone by something so small, a folded square of linen, left without hope of thanks, morning after morning, for a boy no one else had known how to reach. She had worked for Dante Cavallo for 22 years. She had seen rivals made to answer for their treachery and old loyalties honored without a word. She had never, until that morning, seen him set his briefcase down. She thought that was perhaps the most honest thing she had ever watched him do.